Can you guys see that over there? It looks like there's a freaking huge insect. A man holding a phone and filming shouts and points forward. A second later, a black shadow darts towards him, making him gasp in shock and quickly back away. This is a video that's going viral on YouTube. A male student watches in amazement, wondering if it's real, but the person next to him immediately denies it, saying this kind of thing is nothing new on YouTube. Besides, there's no way an insect that big could exist in this world. Being that big, it's no different from a person. A young man with a center-parted hairstyle watches and remarks that it's pretty cool. Something with a human body but insect wings, just like a superhero in an American movie. While they're laughing and talking, another male student appears, takes the phone and watches. The group turns and recognizes the newcomer as Suchan. After watching, he comments that there's nothing cool about insect wings and asks the center-parted guy if he doesn't find it creepy. Putting that aside, Suchan asks the group if they want to go drinking with some girls from their department. As he finishes, the other three young men look weary because they just went yesterday. Besides, they only agreed to go just to meet Suchan. Hearing this, Suchan considers cancelling the drinking party, but the whole group instantly changes their attitude, bowing and assuring him they will definitely be at the meeting spot. Just as he appears, Suchan is an exceptionally outstanding student, a star with over 5,000 followers and always getting A+ grades. He is always busy with meetings. If you look at it in terms of the food chain, he's at the most powerful position. To be a bit childish, this university is divided into two types of people. Carbon once said that in this society, there are only the strong and the weak. Humans also live in herds like animals, similar to ants and lions. No matter the form, a hierarchy always exists. Suchan is the object of attention and envy for the entire university. In other words, he's the strongest one here, a position that makes his student life perfect. As they're walking, the big guy suddenly asks Suchan if he'd mind if another girl joined them for dinner. When Suchan looks curious, this guy points in one direction with a mischievous smile. Next to them, a pink-haired girl cheerfully calls out, "Suchana," and in Suchan's mind, the name Mihai echoes. With a radiant look, Mihai walks over and asks if Suchan's group is going to eat. The big guy whispers that she's Suchan's unofficial girlfriend, which surprises the center-parted guy. The four-eyed guy, on the other hand, thinks Suchan is lucky and is incredibly jealous. Before Suchan can answer, the big guy suggests that Mihai join them for drinks. The center-parted guy adds that Suchan is going too, which makes Mihai drool with excitement and quickly agree. Seeing this reaction, the big guy is even more certain that she's Suchan's unofficial girlfriend. Seeing Mihai's hands about to touch him, Suchan's expression suddenly turns serious, and he decisively pushes her away. This confuses the whole group, and they ask what's wrong, but Suchan doesn't explain. He struggles to apologize, saying his stomach feels a bit upset, and he has to leave first. With that, Suchan leaves, leaving the group bewildered and gossiping. The four-eyed guy isn't too surprised, because this isn't the first time Suchan has acted like this, while the center-parted guy grumbles that Suchan must be on his period. Just then, Suchan adds that he had a wrestling match yesterday and is a bit tired, but this excuse only makes the group more annoyed. What kind of department in this school would have wrestling? After walking a short distance, Suchan sighs, feeling that his recent excuses were foolish. In reality, he has a secret that no one can know. Looking at a blonde male student, Suchan feels that he and the boy are no different. At the beginning of the semester, the blonde guy was very different from how he is now, always popular with everyone. But after some time, he is now always alone. For one reason, he let everyone see his inferiority complex. That day, everyone was gathered chatting over drinks. Perhaps due to an alcohol allergy, he started to break out in an itchy rash. Faced with the fearful expressions of those around him, he left immediately after. After that incident, he lost his confidence and is always alone. Suchan comments that it's very dull because everyone has their own secrets. Once you let people know about your inferiority complex, it's like exposing your weakness to the world. The reason an elite person like Suchan tells such a story is because he also has an inferiority complex. Taking off his outer shirt, Suchan reveals a pair of insect-like wings on his back. Recalling the words of the center-parted guy, Suchan doesn't find them cool at all, but rather disgusting. The cause of this was a dragonfly. When he was a middle school student, Suchan sprayed insecticide on a dragonfly that flew into his room. Immediately after, the dragonfly suddenly turned into a fine powder. The biggest mistake was that Suchan decided to taste that powder. After a period of fatigue and vomiting, Suchan gradually fell asleep, and the next day wings suddenly grew on his back. He fell asleep in fear, constantly thinking about how to hide the wings and live a normal life. Suchan tried to limit contact with people out of fear of his wings being exposed. Just like that, Suchan, all by himself, successfully got into university. But what tired him was the loneliness that made him feel like living was worse than death. So upon entering university, Suchan was determined to change. And the first thing was his wings. He folded the wings and wrapped them up easily. From then on, his confidence gradually returned, creating an unexpected change. Someone once said that confidence is the first requisite for great undertakings. Since then, many more people have gathered around Suchan. But he understood that once the wings were revealed, this perfect student life would end. In fact, Suchan really wanted to hang out with Mihai, but these wings always got in the way. They seemed to want to remind him that they were also a part of his body. If he didn't let them out from under his shirt regularly, it would be like a person sitting for too long whose muscles couldn't take it anymore. Therefore, Sushan had no other choice but to secretly let them out, but he couldn't let anyone see them. Especially Mihai. Even if he died, he wouldn't let her see him like this. As Sushan stepped out of the bathroom, he unexpectedly ran into Mihai. Frozen for a second, both of them screamed in shock. Sushan slammed the door shut with godlike speed, while Mihai turned away and asked why Sushan came out without any clothes on. Behind the door, Sushan was sweating bullets, his expression extremely tense. Considering Mihai's reaction in his mind, she probably hadn't seen the wings yet. As he thought this, Sushan asked Mihai why she was here. It turned out those guys said they would gather for drinks at Suchan's place. So they gave her the address and told her to come first to check it out. Hearing this, Suchan was so angry he gritted his teeth, wishing he could chop up those presumptuous guys. After a moment of silence, Mihai asked if Suchan really left because of a stomachache. It wasn't just today. This had happened many times. Every now and then Suchan would have a pain somewhere. At this point, Mihai asked Suchan if he was hiding something. This question made Suchan's face go pale as a sheet, and he quickly denied it. His voice couldn't help but tremble a little. After he spoke, they both fell into silence. Suddenly, Mihai put down the things in her hands and told Suchan to come out. Curious, Suchan peeked through the door and saw Mihai waiting, insisting he go to the movies with her. If he didn't go, she would sit there until Suchan came out. Suchan, terrified, shouted that he was sick, but Mihai said she already knew everything. Suchan was always alone thinking about something as if trying to hide a big secret. But he wouldn't tell her, which hurt her feelings and made her feel sad. Mihai asked if Suchan remembered how he had saved her from the upperclassmen at the beginning of the semester. She admitted that Suchan's actions were a bit of an abuse of power and very embarrassing, but even so, she was truly grateful for it. So if Suchan didn't hate her, she wanted to abuse her power in return and listen to his troubles. Suchan felt relieved, silently thanking Mihai in his heart. But in the end, Sushan still couldn't let her see the wings. And so Sushan and Mihai set off for the movies, unaware of a mysterious figure following them from behind. He identified Sushan as prey, just like a mantis eating a dragonfly. On the way, Mihai enthusiastically helped other students fill out surveys, despite Suchan's advice that it was almost time for the movie. Helpless Suchan could only let her be because Suchan was too kind-hearted to refuse to help others. Afterward, Mihai even got a piece of candy and showed it off to Suchan. Looking at her, Suchan suddenly had the thought of wanting to date her. During the movie, Mihai accidentally spilled water on her shirt and quickly got up to find the restroom. Suchan watched her, wondering when he would be confident enough to reveal the secret of his wings. And when Mihai knew everything, would she still treat him the same way she did now? As soon as he had the thought, Suchan answered himself. She would definitely be terrified. Everyone would look at him like a monster. He was already very content with the way things were. Suddenly, the screen went black along with the lights plunging the space into darkness. Then a cinema employee ran in, shouting for everyone to get out quickly. He said there was a very dangerous armed individual in the building. The people in the theater wondered if this was some kind of event, but the male employee frantically denied it. He urged them to move quickly according to his instructions. Just as he was about to say more, the employee's body was suddenly thrown forward. A closer look revealed he had been impaled by something like a sharp blade and lifted high into the air. Witnessing this scene, the people in the theater were terrified and fled in a panic. Screams filled the space, mixed with countless cries for help. Suchan stood frozen, wondering what the hell was happening. Did that guy just kill someone? Trying to calm himself. Suchan wanted to leave, but Mihai hadn't returned yet. The man looked at Suchan like a piece of meat drooling. "Found you my prey," he said as he lunged at Suchan. Sensing danger, Suchan instinctively dodged a series of slashes. He was shocked to realize that the blade was actually the man's hand. Suchan's pupils contracted as he looked at the man, wondering what kind of monster he was. The man raised his two arms, revealing a silhouette resembling a praying mantis. He spoke up, asking if Suchan wasn't also a monster. "Is this your first time seeing an insectoid?" As he got closer, he concluded that Suchan had used that insecticide, jungle juice. Hearing this name, Suchan vaguely began to understand everything. The man's expression turned mischievous as he looked at Suchan and laughed, saying that after using that substance, he had transformed into this form and gained a perfect sense of smell. He could smell a delicious scent on Suchan. He wondered what a carnivorous insect would taste like if it ate another insect. Suchan used all his strength, running and screaming in fear. In an instant, the man was right behind him, baring his fangs and slashing down. Just then, a stick swung in, stopping him mid-air and saving Suchan's life. Suchan looked up and saw that it was Mihai. Terrified, she said she had just left the restroom when suddenly everyone was shouting to evacuate, but she couldn't find Suchan anywhere, so before she could finish, the mantis man slowly turned and roared in a cold voice. "How dare you interrupt my meal, Saata?" Before lunging at her frantically. Suchan screamed for Mihai to run immediately. He reached out to stop it, but the mantis man's speed was too fast. He had already launched his attack. Below the building, a large crowd and the police had gathered. A girl was being stopped by the police, but she insisted on going inside because someone was still trapped. While the two sides were arguing, a man suddenly pointed upwards and cried out in shock. Mihai fell straight out of the building, stunning everyone. Suchan ran to the broken window, his mind racing in a moment of internal conflict. If this continued, Mihai would surely die, so he wanted to use his wings. The thing is, he had never flown before. Moreover, if he revealed his wings in front of so many people, his life would be over. Thinking this, Suchan silently apologized to Mihai in his heart. Mihai, still terrified, suddenly had a tear fall from the corner of her eye. The people below were even more astonished when Suchan jumped out, directly reaching out to catch Mihai. Witnessing this, the mantis man laughed loudly, calling Suchan an idiot. Even for an insectoid, surviving a fall from this height was impossible. A coward suddenly playing hero, but doing this was no different from suicide. Suchan looked down at the dozens of people below, feeling that his life was over from this moment on. Remembering Mihai's earlier words, Suchan chose this as his answer to her. The shirt on Suchan's back stretched taut, and a moment later, his wings burst through, revealing themselves. Just as he was about to hit the ground, Suchan flapped his wings and flew up, completely surprising the mantis man. Every human has their own secret. The fate of those who reveal their secrets is no different from exposing their weaknesses to the world. Nicole. Suchan understood this philosophy very well. In this era of big fish eats small fish, a student who had become weak could not survive. Below the female student, Mihai had helped. After a moment of shock, secretly contacted someone. The person on the other end suggested ignoring Suchan, but she thought it would be better to bring him to their school. As she spoke, the girl took off her hat, revealing 2 antennae growing on the top of her head. The sight of Suchan flying with his wings attracted a lot of attention from the people below, along with countless phones recording it. The mantis man cursed silently in his mind. Damn, this guy has wings! While also guessing what kind of insectoid Suchan was. On Suchan's side, he checked Mihai and saw that her head was bleeding and she had fainted. He was both furious and amazed. It was his first time flying, yet it felt so familiar. In an instant, Suchan had flown far away, leaving the mantis man watching helplessly. He deduced that Suchan had obtained dragonfly DNA, thanks to jungle juice. As Suchan rushed to the hospital, the mantis man's excitement grew even more intense. Just thinking about it, he guessed the taste would be amazing. The mantis man was lost in thought, unaware that the other girl had lunged at him from behind. With a loud thwack, the girl had knocked him unconscious on the spot. Afterward, the girl sighed in relief and asked the mantis man if he knew what good he had done. Not only was the video spread on YouTube, but he also killed someone and caused a disturbance in the city center, so he was officially under arrest from now on. No one is allowed to reveal the existence of insectoids, the girl emphasized in a cold voice. A month after the incident, things had gradually calmed down. The video of Suchan flying with his wings had spread widely on YouTube, attracting a lot of attention, including from his friends. The four-eyed guy watched it and even said the insectoid looked a lot like Suchan. But by now, Suchan had become isolated from them due to many rumors circulating in the school. He had previously thought the Ministry of Justice would send people to arrest him, but there was a silver lining to the misfortune. Many news reports appeared explaining that the incident at the cinema was just a promotional event for a university. People generally don't believe in fantasy-like events like this. But Suchan understood the situation now would be exactly like 12 years ago. When he was in elementary school, he was an isolated child who couldn't fit in simply because he didn't give gifts to anyone and had no parents. Back then, Suchan truly wanted to become close to everyone, but someone different from the crowd has no right to be happy. He wondered why he was always so different. As he was walking, someone secretly approached and lifted Suchan's shirt. Suchan froze, instinctively swinging his arm and turning around to shout. The big guy said everyone told him to check if Suchan really had wings, but this reaction was a bit over the top. After saying that, he went back to gossip, with the others ignoring Suchan's anger. Thanks to this reaction, they were all convinced that Suchan really had wings, just as the rumors said. In his heart, Suchan found it ridiculous, because he and they used to always hang out together. But now things had changed unbelievably. Whenever Suchan walked past someone, he would be gossiped about and pointed at with wary eyes. He felt that at this rate, it would be more bearable to be arrested by the Ministry of Justice. Sitting on the bus, Suchan checked TikTok, and as expected, almost everyone had unfollowed him. There were rumors that the Ministry of Justice was investigating the people who appeared in the viral video. He guessed that was why they didn't dare to associate with him anymore. Suchan's finger scrolled to Mihai's account, pushing those people aside. Because no matter what, Mihai was still there. That day she had fainted and been hospitalized, and today Suchan heard she had woken up. Remembering the things Mihai had said, Suchan's mood lifted a little, because for him, just having Mihai was enough. It was just unexpected that when she saw him, she screamed and warned him not to come closer. Suchan's smile slowly faded as he quickly asked Mihai what was wrong. Hearing the scream, hospital staff rushed to pull Suchan out, but he didn't care at all. Contrary to Suchan's expectations, the gentle and kind Mihai of yesterday was now terrified of him. She even told him not to look for her again and called Suchan a monster. Coming back outside, Suchan's spirit felt like it was about to collapse. Mihai's account later unfollowed Suchan as if they had never known each other. Returning home, Suchan took off his shirt, revealing his wings, feeling that it was all their fault. He wanted to take the wings and cut them off, but didn't have the courage to do it. Suchan collapsed sobbing, because he was afraid of the pain and blamed himself for being so cowardly. A month later, Suchan was still quietly alone as usual. Humans live in groups, and for all herd animals on Earth, if they cannot integrate with their herd, there is only one outcome. With that thought, Suchan climbed onto the roof of a building, feeling that dying would be much more comfortable. After thinking, he stepped off and let his body fall, unable to endure this terrible life any longer. But the wings on his back disobeyed, unconsciously spreading out and catching Suchan. Even death couldn't be on his own terms, which made Suchan find it even more disgusting. Just then, the female student appeared in front of Suchan, saying she was so jealous and wished she had a pair of wings too. Suchan's eyes widened, wondering when this girl had gotten here. But more importantly, how could she run on a wall like that? The girl continued asking if Suchan was stupid for trying to jump off a building to commit suicide when he had wings. Taking off her hat, the girl offered to show Suchan how to become a normal person again. Suchan's jaw dropped, not thinking there was a way to go back. Furthermore, this girl was also an insectoid like him. Back inside the house, Suchan didn't waste words and asked the girl how he could return to his original state. The girl didn't answer right away, instead giving Suchan a condition to come for an interview at her school. She said the professor there would explain everything directly. Countless questions popped into Suchan's head, wondering if she was telling him to interview at a university. The girl continued saying she would wait for Suchan by the bus and that he just needed to follow her. Suchan asked how he could trust her, since that mantis man had tried to kill him before. The girl bluntly told Suchan that if he didn't believe her, he could go back up there and jump again. But if he trusted her and followed, he wouldn't be alone anymore. After a moment's thought, Suchan decided to follow, even though he wasn't 100% convinced, but he had nowhere else to go. Later on the bus, the girl took out a can of insecticide and asked Suchan if he knew what it was. According to her, this thing could mix human and insect DNA. For a time, it sold very well because just one spray could kill any pest. But the problem with this substance was that it would mix the DNA of the dead insect with any person nearby. That's why Suchan's wings were like that mantis man's, a transformation after the DNA was mixed. After hearing this, Suchan angrily asked, what damn fool invented this? The girl didn't know because all information related to that company was still a mystery. But one thing was certain, this substance was released to the market through a trading company, and many people had been contaminated. Suchan couldn't understand why no one knew about something this big, and the girl explained that all traces of people like them had been erased. Just as Suchan was about to ask another question, the vehicle arrived. Suchan followed the girl out and discovered they were still in a tunnel. While operating a control panel, the girl asked Suchan where tunnels are usually built. Suchan replied, in mountains. But before he could finish, a blinding light shone straight into his face. The girl added that people like them were very hesitant to appear in front of others, so living in seclusion was the best option. Pointing inside, the girl declared they had arrived. What caught Suchan's eye was an incredibly large school that encompassed an entire forest, and this was the Nest School campus. Suchan stared wide-eyed, not understanding how a place like this could exist inside a mountain. Before he could recover from his surprise, Suchan's pupils contracted as he saw countless insectoids freely moving about. The insect parts on their bodies were completely exposed, unconcealed. Suchan's whole body trembled in shock, unable to believe such a place existed in the world. At the same time, the captured mantis man happened to see Suchan appear here as well. Seeing him stop, a guard behind him questioned him loudly and then jabbed him directly with a baton. While jabbing him, he asked if the mantis man missed the outside world, telling him to wake up from his dream because he would now have to live the rest of his life in a lab. The mantis man groaned from the jabs, but paid no mind, only thinking of his dragonfly prey. Suchan looked around and asked loudly if everyone here was an insectoid. Before he could finish, the girl confirmed that they were all contaminated by jungle juice. Although it was called a university, this place was actually a protected area for people like them. It was just that with this number of people, Suchan felt it was truly too many. It was for this reason that the girl said he wouldn't be alone anymore. At this point, the girl hedged and said she was going to the faculty office and let Suchan look around on his own. She also mentioned that he was the only new student this semester. Afterwards, Suchan walked all around the school, still unable to believe there was a university in Korea, just like a forest, with everyone from children to the elderly. All of them had insect-like parts, and importantly, they didn't hide it. Walking a bit further, Suchan came across a man sitting cross-legged like a statue. His body was covered in honey, attracting a swarm of beetles to suck the nectar. He called them nutritious protein, caught them, and put them in his mouth, chewing noisily. Witnessing this, Suchan couldn't help but grimace and quickly walked away. He felt that no one here was normal. Suddenly, the man grabbed Suchan's shirt, lifted him up, examined his wings, and wondered what kind of insect he was. Suchan quickly regained his senses, shouted loudly, and hastily flapped his wings to move away from the man. The man acted as if nothing had happened, remarking that Suchan kept his wings under his shirt, yet they were still flexible. They even looked quite beautiful, indeed, not bad wings. Then he asked Suchan why he had to hide them like that. Suchan, still not over his panic, suddenly remembered the sight of a terrified Mihai, and his mood sank. He told the man he came here to make them disappear, and then turned to leave. The man remained silent, not replying, and watched Suchan's back, cursing him for being a weirdo. Not long after, Suchan was taken to meet Professor Maduyun. According to him, he had heard reports about Suchan before. After a few greetings, he got to the main point of today's meeting. Turning on the screen beside him, he said he would show Suchan how to return to being a normal person. But first, he would show him a video. As he finished speaking, the screen showed a graduate speech followed by the Cinderella presentation ceremony for the valedictorian. As Suchan watched, he wondered to himself what Cinderella was. In the video, the valedictorian insectoid was seen holding a glass containing some liquid and drinking it. A second later, this person suddenly started convulsing and staggering as if stimulated. Suchan's pupils contracted as the insectoid momentarily transformed back into human form. Excited, Suchan quickly asked what the person had just drunk. Maduhyun calmly explained that their university's research institute had accidentally invented it while studying jungle juice. By applying the principles of jungle juice, they were able to separate and remove the insect DNA. To put it simply, this substance is the medicine to return to being a normal person, and its name is Cinderella. As he spoke, Maduhyun held up a bottle of the medicine. It took Suchan a moment to process all the information, and then he begged the professor for that bottle of medicine. But in this society you only get what you work for. The professor said he couldn't do that. When Suchan asked why, he explained that Cinderella was not an easy medicine to make. It's a liquid medicine concentrated from jungle juice, so the quantity is very limited. He was very sorry, but the truth was turning everyone back into humans was impossible. However, if he wanted to get it, he just needed to enroll here and graduate as the valedictorian. After hearing this, Suchan stood there silently, his mind filled with countless thoughts. He wondered what this school was all about. Back outside, Haejin asked Suchan what he planned to do. Suchan saw that giving the medicine only to the valedictorian was clearly a way to force enrollment. Haejin replied that the choice was Suchan's because if he hated the idea of enrolling, he could still live here. Besides, even if he did enroll, becoming the valedictorian was not easy at all. Suchan interrupted, saying it was fortunate that their condition wasn't money because when it came to grades, he was more than confident. At this point, Suchan chose to register for enrollment. A few hours later, at the entrance to the lecture hall, countless students were gathered chatting excitedly. It didn't take Suchan long to complete the enrollment registration procedures. Listening for a bit, he noticed the people here talked just like normal students, so he remarked that this school wasn't bad. And the reason Suchan's process was so smooth was all thanks to Haejin's help. Seeing Suchan's confusion, she had already written down some general education courses and told him that when registering, he just needed to sign up for one of the 3 on the list. Remembering this, Suchan opened the book and saw that the course names were all very strange. If Haejin hadn't confirmed it, he would have thought she gave him the wrong notebook. Among them, Suchan was drawn to the Principles of Nest Defense course because many people got A's, and moreover, there were no group assignments. And the professor in charge of this course was Maduhyun. Suchan judged him to be quite gentle and decided to register for Professor Ma's class. What Suchan didn't expect was that this school gathered all the students in a classroom to register. Obviously, at other schools, you could just go to an internet cafe to register. Suchan was still thinking this school must have a lot of high-end computers when something suddenly flashed past his face. Looking closer, he saw it was a male and a female student fighting tooth and nail. This scene quickly attracted the attention of Suchan and those around him. The girl grabbed the male student's collar, pinned him down, and relentlessly threw punches while cursing at him. It was because she had previously told the male student not to let her see his face in school, yet he still showed up. The male student, not giving in, kicked the girl in the groin and yelled, "Are you crazy? Why do you always like to pick a fight, you psycho?" Suchan wasn't too surprised by this scene, as it was no different from the university he used to attend. Suddenly a voice came from nearby saying, "Don't be scared." Suchan turned to look, but a figure had already sped past. The voice added that he would see scenes like this as a daily occurrence. The girl who was pinning the guy down was suddenly lifted up, and the male student was also grabbed. Just like that, Haejin gently tossed them to either side as if throwing objects. Suchan watched this scene frozen on the spot. The female student fell flat on her face, and the male student wasn't any better off. He struggled to sit up and asked through gritted teeth, "Which son of a bitch?" The reply was a familiar voice. "Fighting already at the start of the semester, you guys must be in a great mood." Recognizing the person as Haejin, the male student yelled, "Department Representative Aust." Hearing this, Suchan vaguely understood, feeling that this girl was incredibly strong. He couldn't believe he would have to study with people like this. Later, Suchan returned to the lecture hall to wait for the course registration time. Although he was starting to feel that student life was a bit precarious, the important thing now was to register for classes. Suchan understood that no matter how good a student he was, if his schedule was a mess or he missed a good course, his life would be over. Therefore, Suchan was determined to get into Professor Maduhyun's class. At the same time, Maduhyun was leisurely admiring the school scenery. A second later, the beetle-eating man walked in and asked if there was a new student. And this person was also one of the specialized professors. Jijun. Maduhyun quickly understood that he was referring to Suchan and asked Jijun for his thoughts, wondering if this student could survive the course registration war unscathed. Recalling Suchan's words, Professor Jijun smiled wryly and replied, "It's hard to say." Meanwhile, Suchan was waiting second by second in front of his laptop screen. The closer the time got, the more nervous he became. But when the time started, the students in the class suddenly started scrambling and jumping out the window. Bewildered, Suchan stood up and shouted, but no one answered. In an instant, he was the only one left in the classroom. Suchan ran to the window wondering what was happening, and saw all the students running at full speed straight into the forest. This scene made Suchan even more confused about what the hell was going on. Just then, a boy walked in and asked if Suchan was in such a hurry that he didn't research anything. Before Suchan could reply, the boy offered to tell him about the registration process here. Afterward, from a corner of the school, Suchan's shocked voice echoed, "What the hell, we have to go find the professors." The boy confirmed and added that course registration at Nest was a bit unusual. The professors would be somewhere in the mountains, waiting for students to find them. The professors would only give USBs to the first 16 arrivals. Only after getting that USB and plugging it into a computer at the starting point could one register. After hearing this, Suchan could only curse because no one had told him. The boy then asked which professor's class Suchan planned to register for. Suchan replied that it was of course Professor Madohyun's class because he heard he was the easiest grader in the school. He also said his goal was to become the valedictorian. Understanding, the boy smiled and said it was a very difficult path, so he greatly admired people like Suchan. After saying that, the boy bid farewell to Suchan, and they went their separate ways. In his heart, Suchan couldn't help but feel that this boy was very kind. Inside the forest, Suchan realized he had wasted a lot of time and wondered if it was too late to start now. He also didn't know where the others had gone. At this point, Suchan thought he needed to find a high place to observe. Suddenly remembering he had wings on his back, Suchan took off his shirt and flew straight up. This way he could see where everyone was and where they were heading. Observing his surroundings, he saw many flags on the mountain and wondered if those were the destinations. While he was daydreaming, Suchan suddenly saw other students rushing at each other like moths to a flame, teaming up to fight as if they were mortal enemies. Hearing the shouts, Suchan understood they were fighting for class spots, but he found their methods too barbaric. Putting them aside, Suchan turned his attention to the flags, guessing the destination was one of them, but crucially, he had no idea which flag belonged to Professor Ma. Suchan was about to check each location when he suddenly realized something and sped off. At destination, a Professor Ma was leisurely drinking tea and reading a book. Suddenly his attention was drawn forward as someone plummeted from above. With just one look, he recognized the student as Suchan. Despite face-planting into the ground, Suchan's mood was extremely joyful because his prediction was correct. Professor Ma's flag was the one most people were heading towards. At the same time, Professor Ma had the same thought. His class had the highest competition rate, so many people would be heading for it. He mentally noted that Suchan started later than the others, but knew how to turn this disadvantage into an advantage. As he thought this, Professor Ma picked up the box, inside which only one USB remained, and handed it to Suchan, telling him to go back to the classroom and plug it into a computer. Holding the USB, Suchan's mood was excellent. He felt he had taken a step on the path back to being a normal person. After all the USBs were distributed, Professor Ma took out his phone and pressed the upload button. Hearing a notification, Suchan opened his phone and saw a message from Professor Ma. It listed the names of those who were holding the USBs for the Nest defense class. Faced with this, Suchan couldn't understand its purpose at all. At the same time, Professor Jijun also received the message and was surprised that Suchan had gotten a USB. He chuckled, remarking that the main course of the party was just beginning. Not just Suchan and the professors, but all the students in the school received the message. In an instant, a group of people had secretly surrounded Suchan. Hearing a strange noise, Suchan quickly turned to look. What he saw was another student swinging a fist at him. Luckily, Suchan managed to duck and dodge it. Just that one punch was enough to cleanly snap a large tree in half. The newcomer was Hanuso, a beetle insectoid with immense strength. Suchan didn't understand what was happening and could only flee in a hurry, but he was surrounded on all sides by people targeting him. Blocking his path was a spider crab insectoid with 2 extra arms growing from its shoulders. He growled, demanding Suchan hand over the USB. Only then did Suchan understand the reason for the attack. In a moment of crisis, Suchan flew into the air, getting behind the spider crab man. Next, he encountered a series of other students, all rushing at him with murderous intent. Thanks to his agile flying ability, Suchan managed to escape by the skin of his teeth. As he ran, Suchan gritted his teeth, unable to believe there was such a method of course registration in the world. After flying a short distance, Suchan suddenly heard someone calling him. He turned and saw it was the boy he had met earlier, calling him over to a tree trunk. A moment later, the pursuers all went in a different direction, while Suchan had managed to hide inside the tree trunk to escape. Waiting for them to leave, Suchan breathed a sigh of relief and thanked the boy, thinking he was lucky to meet someone so kind. The boy shyly said, "It was nothing, because you're wrong, big brother." When Suchan opened his eyes, he found the boy had used his hand to inject a poisonous stinger into his forehead. Immediately, Suchan's body went limp and he collapsed, letting the boy take the USB from his hand. He explained that it was because Suchan had been stung by a honeybee, so his body would be paralyzed for a while. Then he put on a provocative expression and asked Suchan what was wrong. "Did you really think I was helping you?" he sneered, telling Suchan to wake up, because everyone here was an enemy and he wasn't stupid enough to help his foe. This was a battle where only the strong could survive, and that was the purpose of this registration method. He promised to use it well and told Suchan to learn his lesson and try registering again next year, although guys like Suchan had no chance of becoming valedictorian. Thinking of the word valedictorian, Suchan used all his remaining strength to pull out the stinger. Without Cinderella, he couldn't return to being a normal person. With this thought, Suchan once again flew up high, chasing after the boy. Seeing this, the boy let out a small "oh," but showed no fear. He provoked Suchan, asking what he would do now, since the poison would soon spread throughout his body. Despite his efforts, the distance between Suchan and the boy grew larger and larger. Suddenly, Suchan's eyes underwent a transformation, allowing him to see every movement of the boy clearly. Dragonflies are known as the kings of hunting, with a success rate of up to 95%. The key feature that helps dragonflies achieve this rate is their eyes. A dragonfly's eyes are composed of many honeycomb-like lenses that can observe every subtle movement in 360 degrees. Thanks to such amazing eyes, dragonflies can easily read the movement direction of their prey, thereby predicting movements to initiate a hunt. And this was the first time Suchan had the thought of catching someone unconsciously, awakening the feeling of the hunt. Thanks to his eyes, Suchan soon closed in behind the boy. Before the boy could react, Suchan landed a solid punch right in his face. At the same time, Hejin had completed her registration and let out a sigh of relief. Suddenly, the blonde guy turned and asked if the person she brought was okay. He asked if Hejin also knew that many people were targeting Professor Ma's class. Moreover, if you didn't enroll in time, you would automatically be marked as absent. Faced with this, Hejin didn't answer, but fell into deep thought. Suchan threw a full-force punch, causing the kid to drop the USB he was holding. Seeing this, Suchan quickly flew after it to catch it. But unexpectedly, another student snatched it first. This girl's speed was very fast. In an instant, she had left Suchan far behind. Calming down, Suchan was about to give chase, but realized the kid had been knocked unconscious by the punch. He knew very well that if the kid fell from this height, he would surely die. Looking towards the USB, Suchan felt that saving the kid was impossible. He reasoned that the kid started the trouble, so this was his own doing. Just as the kid's head was about to hit the ground, Suchan suddenly appeared and pulled him up. Despite his efforts, Suchan couldn't pretend not to see because he was still human. Suchan quickly threw the kid onto a treetop and then chased after the female student, but he had already lost her trail. With the poison already in his system, Suchan staggered and fell straight to the ground. With his consciousness fading, his body was completely unable to move. He didn't know how long had passed before. Suchan heard someone's voice and gradually regained consciousness. In front of him was Professor Jijin telling him to get up. Seeing this, Suchan sat up, wondering how long he had been unconscious, and at the same time recognized the man before him. Before Suchan could say anything, the man had already turned and walked away, asking Suchan what he was still doing there when registration was over. Checking his watch, he said there were exactly 5 minutes left, but guessed there were no more USBs. Frustrated, Suchan shouted that he was attacked first and had fainted from poison, so this was clearly cheating. Sighing, Professor Jijin called Suchan pathetic, asking, "So what? Was he trying to say he wanted the special privilege of a retest?" As Suchan was about to argue back, Jijun continued saying that in this school, strength was the most important thing. If you wanted something, you had to fight to get it, and the professors had been monitoring everything. They would prevent anything that endangered lives. Jungle Juice had turned humans into weapons and was full of dangers. In a school full of dangerous people like this, did he think just opening a book and studying was enough? If he wanted that, he could go to Nest's Citizen Protection Department and live his whole life in peace as a defective human. At this point, Professor Jijun threw a bag of snacks to Suchan, telling him if he didn't want to do anything, he could go throw out the trash. He reminded Suchan to remember to sort the trash to protect the planet, then left. Suchan was silent for a moment, then couldn't hold back and buried his face in his hands, bursting into tears. Thinking back, if he had let that kid die, maybe things would have been different better. This thought made Suchan feel even more like he was trash. He cursed angrily and was about to throw the trash in his hand when he remembered the professor's words about sorting it. As he opened it, Suchan grumbled, cursing the professor for giving him this task. Suddenly, Suchan froze and looked down when he saw a USB inside the snack bag. In his mind, he remembered Professor Jijun's words that there were 5 minutes of registration time left, and he stood there dumbfounded. Meanwhile, on Professor Jijun's side, Professor Ma walked up surprised that he had given the USB directly to Suchan like that. He asked if he didn't hate that student anymore or if there was another reason. After a moment of silence, Professor Ma replied simply, "Because I chose him to break." At the same time, Suchan was flying quickly back to the school. Realizing this speed wasn't enough, Suchan wanted to go faster, but knew he couldn't land if he closed his eyes. Suddenly, Suchan stopped, took out a pair of glasses, and put them on. With these, the wind and dust would be reduced a bit, and he could vaguely see his direction. Waiting only for that, Suchan used all his strength and flew off. Near the school, a group of people had set up an ambush waiting for students with USBs to return. Seeing someone flying towards them, they all stood up in unison to greet them with an expectant look. Unexpectedly, before they could do anything, Suchan shot past at high speed, leaving the whole group frozen in place. Regaining their senses, they quickly chased after him, wanting to steal it right in the classroom. Suddenly, the blonde guy appeared beside him and asked if he didn't know the rules. Before the group could react, they were sent flying by the blonde guy's kick. The leader got up in pain and shouted, "Which son of a bitch tripped me?" But he fell silent mid-sentence as something stabbed the ground next to him. In front of him were the imposing figures of Doha and Haesung, showing off their might. They spoke up, asking if they had forgotten that fighting indoors was forbidden. Earlier, after Haejin had enrolled, she received a message from Professor Ji, assigning her the task of helping Suchan. This made her wonder what Suchan had done, because Professor Ji wasn't the type to say such things. Suchan flew straight through the window, aiming for the laptop on the table. He quickly plugged in the USB and completed his course registration. The result was a success, but Suchan's face was still filled with alarm. After a moment, he finally dared to relax his body and let out a sigh. Even though it wasn't Professor Ma's class, there was no more time to think. Suchan could only encourage himself that if he tried hard, he could still become the valedictorian. Suddenly, a notification popped up on the laptop, catching Suchan's attention. Unexpectedly, right after registration ended, the orientation class was starting immediately. As a result, Suchan wanted to enter the class, but was dragged out by security because only students and professors were allowed in. Suchan said he was a student, but they required seeing his student ID to let him in. While Suchan was confused, Haejin arrived with a student card saying it had just been issued. Back inside, Suchan asked her if she studied here too. Haejin said this course suited her, but she had thought Suchan would prefer Professor Ma's department. Haejin told Suchan not to worry about not being able to become the valedictorian. Before she could finish, Suchan interrupted, asking who said you couldn't become the valedictorian just because the course was hard. He confidently stated that he hadn't given up on that goal yet. Entering the lecture hall, Suchan attracted a lot of attention from the students there. They had all previously seen the viral YouTube video and were whispering, feeling like he was a celebrity. Suddenly someone slammed the table and shouted, "Famous, my ass!" Haesung angrily asked if Suchan had lost his mind revealing his wings in front of so many people like that. Thanks to Suchan, they had to work like crazy for a month to change public opinion. They also couldn't get Suchan out of there because they were preventing the government from arresting people. Hearing this, Suchan finally understood why everything was covered up so quickly. Haejin stopped Haesung, saying Suchan didn't need to know, then turned to reassure Suchan not to worry. Everyone here knew that Suchan was trying to save someone, and if it were her, she would have done the same. Therefore, Haejin told Suchan he could stand tall with confidence. In his heart, Suchan thought that Haejin must have faced many difficulties, yet she still said that she was truly a good person. When Haejin left, a big guy sitting lazily at the back of the class suddenly broke into a mischievous smile. Haesung, still annoyed, wondered if Haejin helped Suchan just because he was a new student. Suddenly, someone walked up beside him. Just as Haesung started to ask a question, the big guy slammed his head down hard onto the table. Witnessing this, Suchan's eyes and mouth went wide with confusion. The big guy stretched and said he was planning to talk when everyone was here, but he couldn't sit still in those tiny chairs, which is why he dropped out. A second later, a group of people holding bats walked into the classroom, causing even more confusion. The big guy grinned and continued telling everyone to let him be the valedictorian. Faced with this situation, no one in the class dared to resist. The big guy walked up to them and said he really needed that Cinderella thing, so they didn't need to know much. Just hand over your student IDs, and he would be the only one attending class. Threatened by this group, the entire class didn't dare to move. Understanding their purpose, Suchan furiously lunged at the big guy, swinging his fist. Facing him, the big guy didn't hesitate, asking Suchan what he was doing, charging straight at his face like he was playing basketball. As he spoke, he dodged to the side, letting his underling behind him swing a bat at Suchan. After an unknown amount of time, Suchan woke up to find himself in a bed. He sat up and asked Haejin, learning that this was the infirmary. According to her, when she returned, she found Suchan and Haesung covered in blood and unconscious, so she brought them here. Remembering the student ID, Suchan quickly checked, and sure enough, it was gone. While he was panicking, Haejin reassured Suchan not to worry because it could be reissued. Hearing this, Suchan felt relieved and thought those guys were stupid for stealing it. Haejin said she would go get the student card reissued and told Suchan to just rest here for a while. In Haejin's personality, Suchan was unconsciously reminded of Mihai, who was just as kind and always took care of others. Suddenly, Haesung woke up and spoke, startling Suchan, who asked loudly how the hell he was still alive after being beaten like that. Haesung quickly replied, "How the hell could I die?" and then asked Suchan what had happened. Learning that the big guy took the student cards, Haesung was just as shocked. Suchan said Haejin went to get them reissued, but before he could finish, Haesung cursed him for being stupid, asking if he really believed that. Haesung told Suchan to think again. If that guy wanted to be valedictorian, why would he go through the trouble of preventing all the students from attending class? He clearly only needed to control all the competitions. Moreover, a student ID couldn't be reissued in just one day. As he finished, Suchan's expression turned to shock as he understood the meaning behind Haejin's words. At the same time, Haejin had arrived at the place where the big guy and his underlings were gathered. Without any hesitation, Haejin spoke up, stating that if she just asked, they probably wouldn't return the IDs. The big guy laughed smugly, confirming that was obvious, and in turn asked Haejin if she had ever seen a robber return stolen goods. Just as he thought there was no need to take all the other IDs, because just these few were enough to make Haejin come. From the beginning, his goal was to lure the top student of the first semester, Park Haejin here. An underling secretly approached from behind and was immediately slammed headfirst into the ground by Heijin. Two others charged at the same time, but Heijin suddenly jumped high and spun around. The result was obvious. Both of them were hit. Seeing this, the big guy cursed them as a bunch of idiots for not even being able to touch Heijin. After saying that he took the cards from around his neck and told Heijin he would throw them into the water. Still fighting the others, Heijin ignored them and ran over wanting to snatch the cards. Suddenly, 4 sharp pincers appeared from the big guy's back, blocking her way. Using this, he easily knocked Heijin into the water, entering the water bug's territory. As soon as Heijin surfaced, the big guy used his sharp pincers to stab down, forcing her to struggle to defend herself. For him, eliminating Heijin would make becoming valedictorian a piece of cake, and this way no one would suspect he had killed Heijin. Very quickly, Heijin was grabbed by the neck and forced underwater by the water bug man. With a crazed look, he was confident that no one would know Heijin had drowned. The underling, still bitter, told the water bug man to inflict more pain on Heijin or make her beg before killing her. Hearing this, the water bug man felt it was a great idea. Since he was going to kill her anyway, he might as well have some fun. Suddenly, something shot past extremely quickly, leaving the group dumbfounded and confused. The water bug man was nowhere to be seen, allowing Heijin to surface and catch her breath. She turned to the side and saw Suchan holding the water bug man by the collar and cursing him out. The underlings on the shore saw this and frantically asked who Suchan was, also wondering if he was the insect that had just flown by. Recognizing Suchan, the water bug man was a bit surprised that he wasn't dead after being punched like that. After saying that he threw an uppercut, but Suchan skillfully dodged it. Thanks to his compound eyes, Suchan could clearly see all of the water bug man's movements and easily avoid every attack. Moreover, he felt he could win against an opponent of this level. Suddenly, Heijin yelled for Suchan to dodge quickly while the water bug man smirked. He swung and missed, but he used the sharp pincers on his back to launch a sneak attack. In a flash, Suchan flew backward, narrowly avoiding the pincers, and asked Heijin what was wrong. "I was just about to catch this guy," he said. Hearing this, Heijin didn't see how he was about to catch him at all, because this guy was on a completely different level from the others. Furthermore, they were also at a topographical disadvantage, because the bug inside this guy was an aquatic species. If they were caught and dragged underwater, it meant certain death. They had to get out of the lake immediately. The water bug man held up the student cards in front of him, preventing the two from leaving. He smugly told Suchan's group they could leave if they wanted, but they just wouldn't have their student cards. Suchan couldn't contain his anger. This guy was already stronger, and yet he wanted to fight in an advantageous position. Suddenly, Heijin told Suchan to go back because their target was her. She thought if they got what they wanted, they would just return the student cards. This was her problem, so she didn't want to drag others into danger. Suchan landed and repeated Heijin's earlier words, "I won't be alone," and this time Suchan didn't come alone either. With these words, Hisung appeared behind the underlings, kicking them in the face. Thanks to his grasshopper legs, every kick he landed was a critical hit. Seeing him, the water bug man gritted his teeth, not expecting this guy to recover so quickly. Since Hisung was also a pain in the ass, he planned to deal with him after finishing off Heijin. Before he could finish, Suchan had already shot forward to snatch the student cards, but the water bug man had anticipated it, thinking Suchan's move was a mistake. The water bug man used his pincers to stab at Suchan, who immediately retreated and retorted, "Who's the one who's wrong? All I have to do is not get caught." And so Suchan flew in circles around him, making it impossible for the water bug man to predict his movements. Remembering the classroom, he wondered if it was because there was more space to move around. But even so, this flying skill was too good. Suchan slid backward and then charged forward again. But this time the water bug man had a plan, guessing that Suchan was still only aiming for the student cards. In Suchan's mind, he wondered what would happen if he used the full speed of a dragonfly and punched. With this thought, Suchan suddenly changed direction and threw a punch straight into the water bug man's face, making his eyes widen in shock. Suppressing the pain, he counterattacked with his pincers, but Suchan still easily retreated to dodge. In his mind, Suchan analyzed that the damage from the last punch was reduced by more than half because of the water. After taking a heavy blow, the water bug man suddenly spoke up, suggesting they resolve the issue peacefully. He knew that Suchan's group and Hisung also wanted to become valedictorian to get Cinderella. So reducing the number of competitors would be mutually beneficial. While the water bug man was talking, bubbles suddenly rose behind Heijin. Then an underling surprisingly emerged and put Heijin in a chokehold. He was immediately knocked down by her elbow, but when Heijin turned back, she saw the water bug man behind her. If things had come to this, he thought just killing Heijin would be enough. Unexpectedly, at this moment, Suchan flew in, grabbed both pincers, and pulled the water bug man out of the lake in one motion. Suchan used all his strength to slam him down, causing the water bug man to face plant straight into the ground. Remembering the classroom, he wondered if it was because there was more space to move around. But even so, this flying skill was too good. Suchan slid backward and then charged forward again. But this time the water bug man had a plan, guessing that Suchan was still only aiming for the student cards. In Suchan's mind, he wondered what would happen if he used the full speed of a dragonfly and punched. With this thought, Suchan suddenly changed direction and threw a punch straight into the water bug man's face, making his eyes widen in shock. Suppressing the pain, he counterattacked with his pincers, but Suchan still easily retreated to dodge. In his mind, Suchan analyzed that the damage from the last punch was reduced by more than half because of the water. After taking a heavy blow, the water bug man suddenly spoke up, suggesting they resolve the issue peacefully. He knew that Suchan's group and Hisung also wanted to become valedictorian to get Cinderella, so reducing the number of competitors would be mutually beneficial. While the water bug man was talking, Bubbles suddenly rose behind Hejin. Then an underling surprisingly emerged and put Hejin in a chokehold. He was immediately knocked down by her elbow, but when Hejin turned back, she saw the water bug man behind her. If things had come to this, he thought just killing Hejin would be enough. Unexpectedly, at this moment, Suchan flew in, grabbed both pincers, and pulled the water bug man out of the lake in one motion. Suchan used all his strength to slam him down, causing the water bug man to face-plant straight into the ground. While retrieving the student cards, Suchan cursed that if he became the kind of person worse than an insect, there was no point in using Cinderella. Looking at Suchan from above, Hejin's expression was one of disbelief that the student cards had been recovered just like that. Afterward, the three of them returned to the lecture hall. The orientation session had ended. The group had returned all the IDs to the students, but decided not to let them know who had retrieved them. Hejin wanted to keep it a secret because everything that happened was her fault. Despite these events, Suchan was still extremely happy because he had found a new home for himself. His old house was a bit far from here, so Suchan thought the student dormitory was a pretty good idea. The only problem was that Suchan had become roommates with a scary guy like Hisung. There were only two of them, yet he still wanted to drink beer. A second later, Hejin and Doha came in with snacks and drinks, apologizing for showing up unannounced. They were planning to have a welcome party, and since Suchan and Hisung happened to be in the same room, she suggested Suchan join them for a drink. Perhaps it was because Suchan hadn't had a beer in a long time since coming here. Or maybe because since his wings were revealed, Suchan had been very happy. In the forest outside Nest, the water bug man was sweating profusely after reporting his failed mission. So you couldn't kill the professor's disciple, huh? It's okay, your main purpose was to attract attention anyway. In front of him, an ant-headed woman gave a long speech and then asked the water bug man if he knew that failed predators would be eliminated. Hearing this, the water bug man was terrified and quickly said he could do better next time. This time he would kill that betch of a department representative and get Cinderella. Before he could finish, the woman interrupted, asking what he was talking about, because they didn't need that thing. With a swift slash, the woman sent the water bug man to his grave, remarking that it was a shame someone as strong as him couldn't even defeat some rookies. But she wasn't worried, because their leader would be very happy that they had found what they were looking for in the quarantine room. The next day in the classroom, Suchan couldn't help but feel anxious because today was the first class of the main course, Insect Combat Practice. Understanding his mood, Hejin reassured him not to be too scared. She heard they said today was just a basic test, so it probably wouldn't be anything difficult. Thanks to this, Suchan's spirits lifted as he also thought he had been worrying too much. A moment later, Professor G walked in, and as expected said today was just a simple test, and the results would be reflected in each person's grade. However, it could be lethal, so he reminded the students to be careful. After saying that, he started a chainsaw right in the classroom, making Suchan's face contort, sensing that whatever was coming was not going to be good. Then the whole class was herded out to the training ground, creating a chaotic scene in one corner. Suchan's face was drenched in sweat as he ran and shouted, "What the hell is this?" While Professor G, like a demonic killer, relentlessly chased and slashed at the students from behind. He didn't understand why that homeless old man was here, and moreover, why he suddenly wanted to kill everyone. Hisung explained that it was Professor G in charge of this specialized course, which left Suchan gaping in disbelief. Hejin added that the Insect Combat Practice major focused on learning how to fight by using insect abilities. Their job was to fight against people like the mantis man Suchan had encountered. As she finished, Professor G from behind confirmed it was true. He had explained this at the orientation yesterday, but Suchan wasn't there. Insect abilities are like weapons, and some people abuse them to commit crimes, so he told Suchan he had to learn how to fight. Because Nest has to find and protect all those who have become insectoids. Only the strongest can survive, so if Suchan wants Cinderella, he will have to give up his weak side. The first test is tag. Use your insect abilities to escape, but if he catches you, you will be eliminated from the class immediately. As he finished, all three of them jumped, not daring to believe their ears. Professor G didn't give the three any time to spare. As soon as he finished speaking, he charged forward, swinging the chainsaw. While dodging, Suchan wondered why he told them to learn to fight, but they had to run. Even when he faced that mantis man, he could only run away. Compared to Suchan, Hisung was struggling even more, realizing that Professor G's speed was too fast. It seemed like the chainsaw blade was about to hit him straight in the face. But Suchan managed to pull him away, saving his life. Professor G's eyes narrowed slightly, realizing that Suchan's eyes had turned into the compound eyes of a dragonfly. He wondered to himself, did he read the chainsaw's movements? In the blink of an eye, Professor G chased them down and slashed, separating Suchan and Hisung. You say you came here to get rid of your wings, but you seem quite comfortable with them. It's as if you truly want to become a dragonfly. Hearing these words, Suchan suddenly remembered Mihai and became distracted from the fight. In that very moment, Professor G reached out ready to grab him and shouted, "Don't get distracted, you idiot!" Just then, Hejin promptly hugged Suchan and escaped. Her two breasts bounced right into Suchan's face, making him hold his breath. Hejin reminded him of the situation, but Suchan was so dazed by the position that he could only stammer a flustered "thank you." Reaching a safe place, Hejin turned and shouted to Hisung, "Now's the time!" Understanding her, he slid down to avoid the chainsaw blade and then used his feet to kick up dirt, creating a dust cloud to obscure Professor G's vision. Faced with this trick, he clicked his tongue, remarking that kids these days have no manners. Taking advantage of Professor G being covered in dust, the three of them sprinted away as fast as they could. Meanwhile, in the basement of the prison, the ant-headed woman suddenly appeared. She went to the mantis man's cell and cooed, asking if he was still here. She added that it was so pitiful they would do such a thing to a precious life. She tried to open the door with the waterbug man's student ID, but didn't have enough authority. Then she found the honeybee kid and hugged him affectionately, as if they were mother and son. The kid, his mind hazy, suddenly became alert again, wondering why he had stolen things from the professor's office. Turning to the woman, he didn't even recognize her. Countless unanswerable questions appeared in his mind. The woman said not to worry about such trivial things, and then used the kid's stolen card to open the cell door. The mantis man easily escaped from inside, and asked the woman what kind of insectoid she was because he found her scent so appetizing. The kid was scared out of his wits, but the woman held him tight. Just as their leader said, she found that the mantis man thought just like an insect. With that, she pushed the kid towards the mantis man, whose face was filled with animalistic lust, as a small gift for their first meeting. The mantis man bent down, looking at the kid drooling non-stop, and directly bit into him, chewing voraciously. Witnessing this, the woman even pushed up her ant-like head, remarking how interesting it was. On Suchan's side, he was out of breath from running and hiding for over an hour. Unable to hold back his frustration, he shouted, "What the hell kind of test is this?" Hisung recalled seeing most of the other students getting caught while the three of them were running. Suchan quickly asked if they had really all failed. Hejin guessed so, because Professor G never broke his promises. Hearing this, Suchan sweated even more, because he had a bad feeling from the very beginning. Not to mention the students, none of the professors here were normal at all. Suchan's spirits sank, wishing he could have studied in Professor Ma's class. Seeing this, Hejin comforted him, saying there was still an hour left, so they just needed to hang in there a little longer. Suchan still couldn't believe it, and asked again if Professor G would really fail everyone. In response, Hejin said that was his teaching method. Suddenly, Hisung signaled for the two to be quiet. Not far away, two female students were running, when one of them accidentally slipped and fell flat on her face. The other girl turned to Professor G about to speak, but he adopted an attitude of "so what?" The green-haired girl continued, "Her ankle is sprained." Without even hearing her out, Professor G interrupted, saying that whether it was swollen or a broken leg in the real world, if you can't run, you die. Then he raised the chainsaw again and asked them what they were waiting for, why they weren't running. Faced with this situation, the two female students could only scream in terror, but suddenly Suchan appeared and blocked the chainsaw with his hand. Professor G was silent for a moment, then asked Suchan what the hell he was doing. Suchan shouted, criticizing Professor G for going too far. "It's only the first day, don't you think this is a bit much?" Suchan's action just now was so sudden that Hejin and Hisung couldn't stop him and continued to hide in the bushes. In response, Professor G retorted that if this were a real battle, they would all be dead. "Are you going to say some nonsense like you did to that mantis man, Frain?" he asked. He had said before that if they got caught, they would fail this class, so he had to admit Suchan was very brave. At this, Professor G put away his chainsaw and made a deal with Suchan. If he could land a single blow on him before the class ended, everyone, even those who were caught, would be exempt from failing. If on the other hand he failed all three, Suchan, Hejin and Hisung would be expelled. In his heart, Professor G silently reminded Suchan that now was not the time to worry about others, because the road ahead was still very long. He had to learn how to use his abilities. Back at the school, the woman and the mantis man had escaped. Seeing the mantis man sniffing the air intensely, the woman wondered what he was doing. Their leader was still waiting for them at the headquarters. The mantis man, drooling, replied that there was something very delicious nearby. Moreover, he knew this scent was from his dragonfly prey from before. Suchan quickly retreated and then shot up to gain momentum for an attack. He thought to himself that this wasn't difficult, he just needed to land one hit. Just as his fist was about to hit Professor G's face, the professor lightly turned his body, causing Suchan to miss. At the same time, he remarked that Suchan had never used his fists outside before, because his movements were boring and slow. "I'm afraid you couldn't even catch a fly." Not stopping, Suchan threw a flurry of punches at the professor, but no matter how he attacked the professor, easily dodged them all. His mood was even leisurely, as he continuously taunted Suchan, making him even more frantic. Hisung gritted his teeth in frustration. Professor G really wasn't holding back at all. Hejin, on the other hand, thought there was still a chance, because Suchan possessed compound eyes, and was unconsciously identifying the professor as prey. As expected, after a while of trying, Suchan managed to grab the professor's shirt, and happily struck down. Unexpectedly, with just one move, Professor G twisted Suchan, causing him to fall backward, stunning the group. He coldly asked Suchan, "Did you think the prey would just lie still to be eaten?" Only now did Suchan clearly feel the difference in strength between them, realizing he couldn't defeat Professor G. He wondered if the professor had used his insect powers, and if so, what kind. As if reading Suchan's mind, Professor G said he currently couldn't use his insect powers. He was also an insectoid transformed by jungle juice, but the power had side effects. Because he was also old, his body couldn't withstand those side effects, which was why he used a chainsaw to protect himself. Putting the chainsaw down, he continued saying that in theory, Suchan could easily defeat him, and then asked Suchan if he knew why. Just as Suchan was about to answer, he threw something down. Seeing it was a dragonfly, Suchan froze and screamed in terror. Professor G explained that it was Suchan's disgust for insects that was limiting the level of power he could use. He asked a series of questions about dragonflies, and Suchan knew absolutely nothing about them. To use your power correctly, you must accept that you are part insect. Suchan frowned, wondering, accept it. He had always hated insects, and coupled with wanting to hide the fact he had become an insectoid, he hated them even more. Who could accept becoming a monster? Suddenly the sound of clapping drew their attention. Everyone turned to see the ant-headed girl clapping, applauding that Professor G was indeed different. Seeing this person, Professor G's expression suddenly changed. The woman gave a long speech praising Professor G, but in a tone that was nothing short of mocking. In front of everyone after she finished speaking, she used her tail to send the female student next to her death. Everything happened so suddenly that Suchan could only stare. Furious, Heesung charged out to attack, shouting, "Who the hell are you?" Before he could even touch her, he was stung in the stomach by the woman's tail. Immediately, Heesung's mind became hazy. When the woman pulled the stinger out, he fell straight into her arms. The woman caressed him, telling Heesung not to worry, because the paralyzing venom meant he wouldn't feel any pain. On the other side, Suchan couldn't understand what was happening, wondering to himself if this woman was also from the school. The next words she spoke shocked Suchan even more when she mentioned she had fed someone to the other guy on the way here. Suchan's pupils contracted. He couldn't help but connect this to the incident at the cinema and felt terrified. Just then, Professor G was stabbed from behind exactly like the scene Suchan had witnessed before. Suchan's whole body went rigid, watching motionlessly as Professor G fell, showing the same weakness he had felt before. What caught Suchan's eye was the mantis man in a crazed, bloodthirsty state, scaring him so much he didn't even dare to breathe. Beside him, Hejin was just as horrified, wondering how this mantis man was here when he was supposed to be in the basement area. More importantly, this guy was very different from the first time she caught him, like a predator that had recovered its energy after a meal. It seemed like he was about to attack again, but the woman said he'd had enough. This amount was sufficient to fill him up. The mantis man said a few regretful words, and then, following the woman's order, carried Heesung away, leaving Professor G and the chaotic group of students behind. The woman even looked back, said, "See you next time," and told Professor G to take care of himself. Furious, Hejin tried to stop them, but was held back by Professor G, who deemed the group too dangerous. The Academy's regulations strictly forbid students from fighting outsiders without permission, and he had already contacted the other professors. He told Hejin to let the Academy handle it and just keep herself safe. Agitated, Hejin yelled, "Who cares about damn procedures now? If they delayed, Heesung would surely die." Professor G's gaze remained firm as he said that within the Academy, the law is the law. As long as she was a student at Nest, Hejin couldn't do anything. Suddenly, they both saw Suchan fly up, asking if he would be expelled if he failed. "So I don't need to follow the rules anymore." Cursing the stupid rules, Suchan flew in the direction of the mantis man and the woman, despite Professor G's attempts to stop him. As he flew, Suchan recalled how he had frozen in fear of that mantis man earlier, letting them take Heesung away. Even though he was a bit rough, he was the first person to befriend Suchan. Feeling he had been too timid, Suchan was determined to save him. The injured Professor G could only watch helplessly as Suchan acted on his own. The reason he taught running away before teaching how to fight was because in this wild world, Suchan couldn't always be the hunter. Even the strongest insects have their predators. Teaching students to flee from unbeatable enemies is essential. And for a dragonfly, the praying mantis is an unbeatable predator. The mantis man praised the sneak attack, but unfortunately for Suchan, he could smell him. As he spoke, he charged straight at the descending Suchan. Suchan quickly dodged the slash, reassuring himself not to be afraid. If he got hit by those sharp claws, he would surely die, but he just needed to maintain distance in the air, and when the mantis moved, take the opportunity to gain momentum and punch. Thanks to this calculation, Suchan landed a powerful punch right on the mantis man's chin, but unexpectedly it had no effect. The mantis asked, "Is that all you've learned?" Seeing this wasn't working, Suchan quickly retreated, looking at his bleeding hand, unable to believe this guy's skin was as hard as a rock. The mantis man added that this was just his exoskeleton. Thanks to eating a few things, his body had hardened again. He was about to leave, but if Suchan brought himself here, he must want to be eaten. The mantis man roared with full aggression, closing in on Suchan, making him feel his own smallness and realize he couldn't defeat this guy. As such, he could only raise his arms to block a series of attacks from him. The woman watched and urged the mantis man to kill him and leave quickly before the people from Nest arrived. Hisung in a daze didn't understand why he had fallen asleep. He also saw a group of people calling his name, which he found incredibly annoying. Someone walked up and reminded him that even if he couldn't do anything, he had to try not to be a burden, asking how long he planned to live so weakly. A single sentence, "Wake up, Snatsim brains," snapped Hisung back to reality. He was shocked to see that the person calling him Sushan was fighting with the mantis man. Hisung's mind was filled with questions about what was happening. He wanted to move, but his efforts only made his body tremble slightly. The woman guessed the paralyzing venom had worn off and silently praised Hisung for having some guts. She raised her tail intending to finish Hisung off because whether he was dead or alive, the mantis man would still eat him. Paralyzed Hisung could only watch as the stinger came at him. Suddenly Suchan jumped in between and punched the woman's tail away. Suchan shouted that he would buy some time and told Hisung to run as soon as he recovered. This action astonished Hisung. He couldn't understand how Suchan could so unhesitatingly risk his life here for someone else. Fighting 2 against 1, Suchan was quickly and brutally beaten by the woman and the mantis man. In the past, Suchan had wondered why he saved others' lives when he didn't even get a thank you, but at least by doing so he wouldn't feel regret because it was the right thing to do. At that moment, Suchan was pinned under the mantis man's foot, about to be finished off. Hisung's expression turned extremely serious. He suddenly grabbed Suchan's shirt and dragged him away at godlike speed. It happened so fast that the woman and the mantis man could only stare blankly after them. Looking over, the woman couldn't believe this guy could run so fast. Each jump probably covered more than 100 meters. Although fables about the ant and the grasshopper make people think grasshoppers are lazy insects. But in reality, that's not the case. Specifically, the grasshopper is a carnivorous insect in the Orthoptera order with very long and fast hind legs. They use these legs to move very quickly and catch prey. Each jump easily covers a distance 12 times its body length. After running for a bit, Hisung asked Suchan what the hell he was thinking turning himself into such a wreck. He remarked that he was a real idiot. The woman sighed, concluding that the mantis man wouldn't be able to catch Hisung anymore and advised him to give up. The mantis man's eyes darkened as he said he didn't want to give up. At the same time, he could smell Suchan's group stopping somewhere nearby. Hisung couldn't believe his ears when Suchan said he didn't want to run away. He asked in astonishment, "Do you want both of us to go take down that mantis?" He mocked that the mantis must have punched a hole in Suchan's head for him to have such an idea. Hisung went on a long rant, asking Suchan if he hadn't learned anything all day. If you can't win, running is the right thing to do. Suchan knew this point. The mantis man was unlike anyone they had fought before. If they made a mistake, they could die. That's why Suchan wanted to finish this guy off even more, because if he let him escape, someone else who knew nothing about him would become his next victim. Hisung understood, but had no idea how to land a punch on him. Suchan planned for the two of them to hold him off and wait for the reinforcements Professor G had called. Moreover, he had an idea. Meanwhile, Hejin was trying her best to stop Professor G's bleeding her mind in a panic, not knowing what to do. She anxiously wanted to leave, but couldn't just leave the professor here like this. Suddenly, Hejin sensed someone flash past behind her at godlike speed and then disappear. The woman consoled the mantis man, saying that after they left, she would find more prey for him. The mantis man sniffed the air intensely and suddenly sensed Suchan's group right next to him. He had just turned to look when he saw Suchan swooping down from above, using a vine to wrap around the woman's neck and pull her away. The action was so fast that the mantis man couldn't react at all. In an instant, Suchan had tied the woman to a tree and secured her tightly. Through observation, the mantis man realized it was thanks to the glasses that Suchan could fly so fast. He had just started to ask what Suchan was doing when he took a kick straight to the face, but he still didn't feel any pain. On the contrary, Suchan's leg hurt like hell after the kick, making him even more certain that he had no way to break through that skin. The mantis man raised his 2 sharp pincers, stabbed forward, and roared that he was the strongest here. A guy who could only fly like Suchan could never defeat him. Suchan tried to dodge, but couldn't keep his body from getting injured. He came up with a plan. If he maintained distance in the air, he could probably hold him off for a few minutes. Hisung used his supermodel-like legs to turn around and throw something high into the air. Back with Professor G, he told Hejin that Suchan's group had taken that thing. He angrily cursed them as a bunch of bastards, concluding that this time Suchan's group had won by snatching it right from under his nose. Suchan flew up and grabbed the super weapon, the chainsaw starting it in mid-air and slashing down in one motion. Hisung's voice echoed, "Kill this motherfucker, my friend." Normally, a dragonfly cannot defeat a praying mantis, but that's only true for insects, because humans always find a way. With a swift slash, Suchan chopped off the mantis man's arm. He roared in pain, cursing Suchan for fighting dirty. Furious, the mantis man swung his remaining arm wildly in the air, but Suchan had already retreated. Hisung saw Suchan had cut off the entire arm and acknowledged that this guy wasn't kidding around. The mantis man, furious, didn't care much and slashed forward, questioning if Suchan dared to see him as prey. Just then the chainsaw wouldn't start, and Suchan could only use it to block the attack. One person slashed with all his might, the other blocked with all his might. After a moment of struggle, the mantis man suddenly bent down and slashed upwards, taking a powerful blow the chainsaw. Blade shattered and hit Sushan in the eye. Not stopping there, the mantis man smashed the chainsaw to pieces, concluding that without a weapon, Sushan could only run just like last time. While Sushan was at a loss, Heesung kicked the mantis man dozens of times from behind. You think you're so tough talking big with only one arm? The mantis's sharp pincer swung straight at Heesung's face. To balance unrestricted reproduction and the growth rate of living species, Mother Nature came up with a harsh solution. That is, species that can unilaterally crush their opponents always have overwhelming power. This also means their natural predator is the god of death. The mantis man pinned Heesung to the ground with one foot and spread his arm to catch Suchan, who was trying to help. His delighted expression showed he found this hunt incredibly interesting. Suchan was cut by the pincer bleeding and couldn't accept that after doing so much, he was still outmatched by the mantis man. The mantis opened its mouth as if from a horror movie, about to take a bite out of Suchan, when suddenly an explosion occurred, sending him flying into a tree trunk. Suchan saw a muscular figure in front of him chiding him for talking big, only to get beaten up. The newcomer was none other than Professor G, and the explosion just now was caused by him punching the ground. The white smoke still hadn't completely dissipated. Suchan remembered the scene of him being impaled and couldn't help but wonder how he had recovered. Professor G told Suchan not to worry because he had received some treatment from the reinforcements. On his chest, where the fatal wound had been, there wasn't even a scratch now. It was lucky that woman was there, allowing him to follow. Heesung's footprints arrived just in time. Before that, he was worried the two were already buried, but it seems the praying mantis guy had taken a terrible beating. To face a natural enemy and do so well, especially as just a new student, Professor G acknowledged that Suchan had proven himself. Turning to the praying mantis guy, Professor G said he was just lucky to break through with one hit earlier, but now he could only dream. The praying mantis guy, without any fear, madly rushed forward, feeling that more people would only make him eat more. Professor G frowned, congratulating him for ruining his first class of the second semester and piercing a body with that cheap trick. For this, he would definitely pay him back with both principal and interest. Professor G's arm was seen continuously emitting white smoke, waiting for the praying mantis guy to strike down. This scene made Suchan stand dumbfounded, staring. The bombardier beetle lives up to its name. This insect has a unique ability. The bombardier beetle can mix chemicals in its body to create heat. When fighting predators, it can spray a mixture of those high-temperature chemicals, creating an explosion. Professor G clenched his fist and launched it straight at the praying mantis guy's face with the explosive fist technique. With a bang, a dazzling light and a storm spread out between the two, radiating all around. After the smoke cleared, the praying mantis guy fell while Professor G still stood tall and firm on his feet. After this one move, the praying mantis guy's eyes turned white, his whole body was scorched, and his life status was unknown. Professor G told Suchan, this is what happens to those who use jungle juice. They call it the insect complex, which is the true potential of insect humans. Suchan's whole body trembled, wondering to himself if this was the name of the insect power. A huge explosion just happened. The praying mantis guy was knocked unconscious in one punch. Paying close attention, Suchan saw Professor G's arm trembling violently, realizing it was a side effect that came with the power. As if reading Suchan's mind, he asked if he thought this was someone else's problem. This is the price he had to pay for using the complex too recklessly in the past, causing it to deteriorate to an irreparable state. He reminded Suchan that if he didn't want to end up like him, it was best to fully master the complex's power as soon as possible. After that, the incident ended and the group returned safely, although not entirely unharmed. Suchan was bruised all over with a fractured ribcage. Heesung was poisoned by a bee, his face bruised. Despite that, Suchan breathed a sigh of relief as Professor G let the incident of failing an expulsion slide. Heesung overheard that they would continue to lock up the praying mantis guy and increase security many times over. What made Suchan uneasy was that they had lost track of the masked woman who released the praying mantis guy. Although Hajin said the two were great for holding off the praying mantis guy, Suchan actually felt he couldn't do anything on his own. So following the professor's advice, he was trying to make the complex's power his own as soon as possible. That night while sleeping, Heesung suddenly sat up in bed. His eyes were vacant as if soulless. On his neck there was still a mark from where the ant-headed woman had injected him with heroin. Just like that, he silently staggered into the forest and soon encountered that woman. She belongs to the emerald jewel wasp species, which can turn its target into a zombie-like state by injecting neurotoxins into the host. She caressed Heesung, guessing that the others hadn't noticed this yet. She gave Heesung a long speech, saying this place was full of hypocrisy and lies. It's like a cage that imprisons monsters, like that praying mantis guy here. Protect all insect humans. No, they can't protect anyone. At this point, she suddenly choked Heesung, intending to kill him. With a crash, Professor G struck down from above, separating her from Heesung. He knew for sure she would appear again. Putting himself in her shoes, Professor G would want to provoke by destroying what he protected, which is why he didn't treat the sting on Heesung. Clenching his fists, Professor G was confident that no matter what the woman intended to do, he could protect Heesung. This time Professor G revealed the woman's name was Singayon. At the same time, Suchan was hiding in the bushes, secretly watching. Hisung suddenly walked out, as if sleepwalking, so he followed. But what on earth was happening here? Laying Hisung down, Professor G said coldly that it had been a long time since he'd seen Singayon. It has been 5 years since she left. Suchan became more curious, listening intently and guessing if this woman used to be a student here. Professor G continued to ask how she had been lately. With the same mocking tone, Singayon said the two of them didn't come here to chat. Could this be a part of it when he asks her why she's doing these things? Professor G seemed flustered, thinking that at least this was a way to show respect to a student he hadn't seen in a long time. But if she didn't want to, he would defeat her and take Singayon back to Nest. As he spoke, Professor G clenched his fist and struck straight at Singayon, clearly showing a hostile attitude. Singayon gracefully retreated, letting out a soft, unafraid sigh. In a provocative tone, "Defeat me so cruelly." Professor G's eyes flashed with anger as he yelled, "Do you think you have the right to say that after killing 2 students and 8 staff members?" With that mood, Professor G seemed to pour all his strength into his fist and lunged forward to attack. This one punch had terrifying power, directly felling the trees in front and creating a large explosion. Singayon, completely unscathed, said that Professor G was still no match for her. At the same time, she flipped over Professor G's head, silently aiming her sharp tail at the back of his neck. Instantly, Professor G spun around and slapped the wasp's tail away, forcing her to retreat. Suddenly, Professor Ma appeared and called out for them to stop. He felt that Singayon didn't seem to welcome him and suggested she stop and leave. Nest's security agency would be there soon, so he guessed she didn't want to shed any more blood. Professor G wanted to stop her, but Professor Ma whispered that there was some leader behind Singayon. Letting her go now and tracking her later wasn't wise, because with her abilities, it was very likely more people would die. Just as Professor Ma said a moment later, countless shouts were heard. Singayon emphasized that next time she came, she would kill them all and then flee. By the time the security staff arrived, only Professor Ma and Professor G were left along with a large fire. Professor Ma said he understood Professor G wanted to correct Singayon's character because she was once his student. But being so seriously injured, it's very dangerous to go alone. Professor G tightly gripped his trembling arm and replied with a thank you. Earlier, Professor Ma had his staff secretly follow Singayon, so he suggested leaving the rest to them. As if sensing something, Professor Ma thought Professor G needed a talk. Following Professor Ma's gaze, Professor G saw Suchan, who had appeared out of nowhere supporting Hisung. Later on the way back, Suchan asked about Hisung's condition and learned it wasn't a cause for concern. Just neutralize the venom and toss him onto the bed and he'll be fine. At this, Suchan fell silent, feeling awkward. Professor G spoke up, telling Suchan to keep what he saw a secret, while admitting that person was once his student. After an incident 5 years ago, Singayon left the school, and they haven't heard from her since. But now it seems she has malicious intent attacking Nest, and its students making her existence a threat, but it's not yet time to announce this to the public. Suchan didn't rush to agree, but made a condition if Professor G taught him the technique he used to fight the praying mantis guy. It would also mean teaching him how to use the insect complex. Suchan had been thinking about what Professor G said to accept the insect part of himself and let go of his hatred for them. Although it was difficult today, he saw his weakness, having to watch helplessly as Hisung was taken away. If it weren't for Professor Ma, both of them might have been killed by the praying mantis guy. Suchan's eyes were full of determination. He wanted to get stronger and expressed his desire to learn, even if he didn't know how. Professor G gritted his teeth and chuckled to himself, thinking, is this a deal? This unintentionally made him admire Suchan's courage. After that, Professor Ma didn't say yes, only told Suchan to get ready. A few days later at the school's student cafeteria, Hisung explained while eating that a few days ago he woke up in the hospital and couldn't find his clothes anywhere. Suddenly, Suchan and Hejin both looked in one direction, wondering if that was Doha. At that moment, Doha was in line for food, looking like a gangster, which made everyone around them keep their distance. Suchan asked Hejin and learned that Doha's case was a bit special. Jungle juice turns humans into insect humans, but in some cases, people have the DNA of arthropods, not insects, so they are investigating its effects on organisms. So to help with the investigation, a few students were excused from class to undergo some tests in the lab. Hejin guessed that Doha would be joining their class today. Suchan remembered and asked Hejin what kind of insect she was. If it weren't for the antennae on her head, Suchan wouldn't even have recognized her as an insect human. Hejin hesitated and said it was related to the praying mantis order, which made Suchan too scared to ask further due to his psychological trauma with that damn thing. He seemed to understand in his heart why Hejin was so strong. Doha walked straight up to the three of them and kicked Hisung away as a way of saying hello. Acting as if nothing happened, he asked Hejin and Suchan if they knew the group had a new project today, leaving a furious Hisung to yell insults. Suchan was curious, and Hejin explained that the group projects for the insect combat class all have different themes. But in some cases they might encounter users of faulty jungle juice, so they might have to fight other insect humans. After hearing this, Sushan thought it was an opportunity to test what he had practiced the other day. Hejin continued saying the teams were divided into groups of 4 by the professor. As expected, Suchan was in the same group as Hejin's crew, which made him very confident, guessing that with such pro VIP members, everything would be easy to handle. A few days later, it was raining cats and dogs. Professor G was working out in the gym when a staff member came in to report an emergency. The male staff member said he had just received news about the group project of Team A4, who were located, and while on their way to a location, one of the members had died. On the electronic board was a photo of Sushan's group members, which made Professor G freeze on the spot. On the faculty's lecture hall, Professor G publicly announced that this time's group project was to go outside the Nest campus to find bottles of jungle juice and bring them back. To Suchan's surprise, Professor G lectured further, explaining that because there wasn't much advertising, this thing wasn't famous, but it still had a lot of customers. Not only do normal families use it, but cyclists and campers outside also suffer from its side effects. There are also people who do challenges involving spraying various types of insects. They couldn't find the company that produced jungle juice, but it was distributed by the company Natural. But right after it was released to the market, this company went bankrupt. Therefore, everything about jungle juice remains very mysterious. The good thing is that this company is located in Gangwon province, so the consequences are mainly limited to within the province and surrounding areas. Suchan seemed to understand why this matter could be hidden, because it didn't happen nationwide. Professor G continued saying that to produce Cinderella's cure jungle juice is mandatory. Currently, Nest's biggest mission is to collect as much of it as possible, but this is also a lesson in intelligence operations and perseverance in searching for something. In total, the groups will have 1 week to scour the entire Gangwon province to bring them back here. Any team that finds 1 bottle will get an A+ for the whole team. This score was desirable, but the whole class wasn't very enthusiastic because jungle juice is very hard to find. Now, no one sells it anymore, so the probability of fighting over it is extremely high. A few people were discouraged, saying if they had known about a mission like this, they wouldn't have signed up. Hearing these words, Sushan couldn't help but ponder with doubt. And so Professor G had the whole class disperse into their groups. After leaving the school, Suchan's group also split into 2 teams to increase their search efficiency. While Hejin still didn't know where to start, Suchan was excited, feeling that becoming the valedictorian was no longer a dream. He took Hejin's hand and pulled her to a villa, saying that the jungle juice bottle used to scare him, but he still kept it, just in case. Suchan excitedly went inside the house, not expecting the mess inside. Seeing this scene, Hejin even thought it was a robbery. Sushan hurriedly rummaged through the room searching for jungle juice, but it had vanished without a trace. Suddenly Suchan remembered and quickly asked if Hejin had one. She had used jungle juice before, so he guessed she must have one. Hejin's expression darkened. She said there was no need to go to her house and turned to leave, suggesting they search inside the city. Faced with this reaction, Sushan was bewildered, not understanding what he had done wrong. After that, the 2 searched online and went to stores, but with no results. Desperation breeds thieves. Sushan even wanted to cheat, but luckily, Hejin stopped him. After a few hours, Suchan sighed in frustration, not knowing where to search next. Hejin reassessed that this mission was very difficult and suggested they take a break here. Anyway, the group still had to follow the dormitory curfew. Suchan's mood soured as his dream of being valedictorian gradually faded. Hejin suddenly asked why Suchan wanted to get rid of his wings so badly. Is it because of the girlfriend he saved at the movie theater? These words made Suchan spit out all the water in his mouth and quickly deny it. After composing himself, Suchan said that girl wasn't his girlfriend. He wanted to get back everything he had lost, but most of all, he wanted to return to a normal life. Even though Mihi pushed him away and called him a monster, Suchan didn't think she was a bad person. She was almost killed by the praying mantis guy, so of course she would be afraid of insect humans. Hearing this, Hejin praised Suchan as a strong man, but before she could finish, Suchan suddenly turned and thanked her for coming to find him. Suchan thought that if he hadn't met Hejin in that building, he might have been done for by now. Thanks to Hejin, he found a new purpose in life. Suchan wanted to say more, but was afraid he couldn't hold back his tears. Hejin replied brightly that it was lucky Suchan met her. Thinking back, Suchan remembered Hejin was the class president in the first semester, so he guessed she must have worked very hard. To become the valedictorian, Suchan would set his goal to defeat Hejin first. Unexpectedly, Hejin replied that she didn't want to go back. Suchan was about to clarify when his phone rang. The caller was Hisung, who excitedly said they had found an abandoned warehouse full of treasures. It used to belong to the company that distributed jungle juice, so if they got everything there, they would get more than just an A+. Suchan excitedly asked again, then turned and happily asked Hejin if she heard. Hejin's expression changed as she was about to answer the phone, but Hisung had already hung up. Suchan called back, but the line was busy while Hejin was eager to go there. She explained that the mission was to retrieve all the sold jungle juice bottles, and Nest had never found any unsold jungle juice before. And now they found a whole warehouse. This is too strange, it must be a trap. Not long after, Suchan used his flying ability to take them both to the location Hisung sent. Indeed, it was an incredibly dark, abandoned warehouse. Suchan glanced over and thought it was terrifyingly scary, yet those two dared to go in. Hejin didn't care much and decisively stepped inside, worried about Hisung's group. Suchan followed using his phone to look around, not thinking it was a trap, because the dust looked very real. While still thinking, Suchan kicked a box, which opened to reveal many bottles of jungle juice inside. Suchan was happy, thinking it wasn't a trap. But when he turned to the side, Hejin had fallen. The smile on Suchan's face gradually faded, as in the darkness. An insect human with its claws covered in Hejin's blood appeared. He asked Suchan if he had found what he was looking for, because he had found what he needed. Hejin collapsed motionless in a pool of blood, her life status unknown. When he was a child, Suchan heard his grandmother say that he had been separated from his parents since birth. Therefore, Suchan should be used to separation, but that wasn't the case. Suchan couldn't get used to it at all. He could never get used to being separated from his loved ones. Rage welled up in Suchan's heart, and he flew straight at the insect human. He spoke without any hesitation, knowing Suchan was furious about his friend's death, but getting too close to him was no different from rushing to one's death. After saying that, he swung his large claw straight at Suchan. He immediately used his compound eyes to dodge to the side and punch the earwig-like guy straight in the face. A blow that, it must be said, used all of Suchan's strength. Before Suchan's eyes, the earwig-like guy gently snapped his jaw back into place and asked, "Strong, huh?" Suchan's hand was covered in blood, and the feeling was just like punching the praying mantis guy before. The earwig-like guy attacked while asking if Suchan had never absorbed before. To Suchan's confusion, he explained that it meant eating other insect people. When he first ate them, he felt so euphoric he could fly to the sky, a feeling like taking opium. Once you take a bite, you can't stop. While he continuously absorbed that enchanting substance, he realized a truth: he was getting stronger. Previously, he was bound by a society where money and status were power, forcing him to struggle in every way to survive. But now he has been freed from it and is pursuing what is called true power, the pure power of a new species, and then the class society will soon collapse, helping him stand at the top. Someone told him that if he just waited in this warehouse, prey would automatically enter his den, and unexpectedly, it was true. He would eat both Suchan and Hejin, leaving nothing behind. At this point, the earwig-like guy used his pincer to clamp down on Suchan, but suddenly his arm started to tremble. Despite his injuries, Suchan used his hands to break the pincer off his body and angrily asked him if he killed Hejin for this reason. "You dog, remember my face?" The earwig-like guy used his strength to clamp down again, but Suchan had already escaped, flying down and punching him straight in the face. After taking one or two blows, the earwig-like guy managed to grab Suchan's leg and pull him back. Seeing Suchan's struggling appearance, he determined that no matter how hard he tried, the difference in their levels was too great. With these words, the sharp pincer stabbed straight down at Suchan. Suchan wanted to counterattack, but was hit square in the face mid-air. Despite that, Suchan still madly rushed forward, disregarding everything to kill this guy. Thanks to that effort, Suchan delivered an extremely powerful blow that sent the earwig-like guy flying. But unexpectedly, the hit only hurt him slightly. Suchan wondered to himself if he really couldn't hurt him. He quickly retreated, remembering the technique Professor G had taught him. Once again, Suchan rushed forward, but after a few steps, he collapsed, discovering his entire body couldn't move. Suchan's mind went blank with confusion. Then he suddenly remembered Professor G's words: using insect power without sufficient mastery would cause side effects. Facing the imminent danger, Suchan used all his willpower to control his body, but it was still useless. It seemed like he was about to die. But no, because if he died, the story would be over. Hejin, by some miraculous means, woke up and knocked away the pincer, saving Suchan. Suchan sat up and asked her how her wounds had healed. Seeing that she wasn't dead, the earwig-like guy twisted his arm and attacked again. Suchan yelled, "Danger, but Hejin, on the contrary, was unfazed and turned around to repeat Suchan's earlier question. Before Suchan's eyes, she gathered momentum and struck the pincer, sending a shockwave that spread throughout the earwig-like guy's body. Then she told Suchan to watch closely, because now she would reveal what kind of insect she was. Before becoming an insect human, Hejin was always teased by her classmates as Cockroach Hejin because she lived in a dark basement. They even went too far, recording Hejin entering and leaving her house and sharing it at school for fun. Each time that happened, a young man would step in and teach that group a lesson. With those things, Hejin could only endure thanks to her older brother, Park Jung-jin. The two of them lived in a rundown place, so the appearance of insects was very common. Hejin was extremely afraid of them, but luckily her brother always stepped up to handle it. Each time, the already cramped house became even messier because they had to rummage through everything to deal with the cockroaches. By chance, the two of them learned about jungle juice, a spray that could kill any insect. Down in this basement, it meant nothing, but for Hejin, there was still a glimmer of hope. That was before her brother died of exhaustion. He worked at a construction site just to earn a little extra money, and poverty killed him. Hejin wished everything was just a dream, but those classmates still wouldn't leave her alone. They found a bucket full of cockroaches and directly poured them all into Hejin's house. For her, this was the worst nightmare. In a panic, Hejin grabbed the jungle juice. and frantically sprayed all of it on them. Back in the present, Hejin unleashed a barrage of powerful blows, causing the earwig-like guy to struggle and roll around, unable to fight back. He didn't understand. He had clearly dealt with Hejin with a surprise attack earlier. Hejin did a flip and questioned him, "Where are Doha and Hisung?" before landing with a thud. Witnessing this scene, Suchan stood there with his mouth agape, feeling that Hejin's strength had no weaknesses. But he still didn't understand how she managed to recover when her injuries were so severe. He had thought she had lost all hope of living. Within Hejin's arms, Suchan asked worriedly. In just a few seconds, the wound on it disappeared, which surprised Suchan even more, and he asked her if this was insect power. Hejin confirmed, saying she was a cockroach insect. Just then, the earwig-like guy recovered and attacked. As he fought, he voiced his thoughts that Hejin was a filthy little cockroach, asking where she caught that insect. Was it in a cramped, dark rental room or in a sewer drain and garbage dump? The last sentence he mentioned, the basement, immediately infuriated Hejin. The two rushed straight at each other, fighting fiercely. On the ground, Suchan understood why she had hidden what type of insect she was until now. He tried to stand up, but his body still wouldn't obey. The earwig-like guy kept verbally attacking Hejin with words similar to NONO on TikTok. Oh, the poor old woman in the lonely winter. The more he fought, the more frustrated the earwig-like guy became, because Hejin's speed was too fast, so he kept missing. He told himself that no matter how fast she was, he would find a way to hit her. Remembering Suchan, he shifted his target to him. As expected, Hejin risked danger to save him, pushing Suchan away and taking a fatal blow instead. The earwig-like guy grinned, knocked Hejin away and laughed triumphantly. Suchan stared in shock at Hejin's stomach, which had now turned into a donut, and watched her fall motionless. The earwig-like guy told Suchan not to be too sad because if she hadn't become an insect human, Hejin would have died long ago. The poor in this world cannot survive. Suddenly his pupils contracted to the size of a needle as Suchan's wings in front of him suddenly flashed. The earwig-like guy's eyes widened as he asked if this was a power-up from the author. He clearly hadn't seen this thing just now. Reconsidering, the earwig-like guy was certain Suchan had never absorbed before, and the transformation occurred after the little cockroach died. The earwig-like guy seemed to understand that besides absorption, there was another method for insect humans to fully develop. Thinking of this, he drooled even more, wondering what he would get from eating Suchan, as the nutrition a predator receives varies depending on the prey. He lunged with his pincer, asking loudly, "What will happen to me?" Unexpectedly, in a flash, Suchan appeared right in front of him, and he only had time to let out a grunt before taking a direct punch that sent him flying. Suchan's expression was emotionless as he continued to fly after him, and the earwig-like guy could only raise his pincers to block. He had a clear feeling that Suchan, using jungle juice, would turn a person into a powerful monster, but their level of abnormality and intellect would only be on par with their human level. But now he couldn't feel any humanity in this person at all. Suchan angrily declared that if he didn't die today, it would be the earwig-like guy's death anniversary. If he didn't become food, then he would be the food. A wave of ferocity spread out, terrifying the earwig-like guy. Suddenly, his body was grabbed by Suchan's pincer, thrown high up, then his face was grabbed and slammed straight onto the concrete floor. The terrified earwig-like guy still tried to open his mouth and call Suchan a blockhead for not paying attention to what was behind him. Indeed, his pincer had circled behind Suchan for a sneak attack, but he never would have dreamed that Suchan would use his mouth to bite it off. A dragonfly's weapons are not just its wings and compound eyes, but the power it uses to catch prey is its teeth. One bite from Suchan directly bit off one side of the pincer, making the earwig like guy sweat bullets. Every day, Professor G trained Suchan's physical strength, trying to reduce the side effects of the complex. Then he moved on to the theoretical lesson of the insect's attitude posture. Attitude posture means attitude and posture. The primitive instincts of animals will affect humans. Human rationality can control it, but only for a moment before animal instincts become stronger. Therefore, everyone contains the power of an insect and can unleash even greater strength. The reason for controlling attitude posture is very complex. It's not because instinct is lower than reason, but because of which state is completely dominant. When the thread of reason breaks, that's when animal instinct takes over, because reason can be devoured. The earwig-like guy's eyes widened, sensing that Suchan was now completely different from before. He pursued the primitive power of creatures, until now constantly searching and hunting for prey, but today he chose the wrong prey. The pincer was slowly torn apart, causing him extreme pain. Suchan, in a state of fury, threw it behind him and continued to tear it into small pieces completely, without any rational thought. The earwig-like guy cried out in pain and begged, but it only made Suchan more ferocious. He opened his mouth and bit down on the pincer, tearing it to pieces like a wild beast tearing apart its prey. In the warehouse, screams mixed, with fresh blood splattered everywhere. After a while, the earwig-like guy could no longer scream his mouth, whimpering that he was wrong and begging for help. Suchan slammed his head down, lifted him up and let out a resounding roar. Just as he was about to eat this guy, someone else appeared and made him fall. In his hand, he held something like a water ball, saying Suchan had gone too far because prey eating a hunting dog was not allowed. As he finished speaking, he created a mass of tentacles that wrapped around Suchan's body, tying him up. He had created this hunting ground to raise the earwig-like guy, but in the end, it was useless. Regardless, he didn't expect someone so special like this to appear, besides Singayon, and also at Nest. He lifted Suchan's head, suggesting he join him but had to stop because people from the academy had arrived outside. In a daze, Suchan heard this guy tell him to turn into a monster again the next time they met. Suchan couldn't see his face clearly, only vaguely guessing it was a man. Outside, the rescue team picked up a new signal, and upon arriving couldn't help but wonder why natural life was this warehouse. Suddenly, a sound came from inside, startling the group and putting them on alert. Then they saw Suchan carrying Hejin in his arms, desperately asking for help to save her. At the entrance of Nest, Professor G and many others were already waiting. Professor G's face couldn't help but show surprise. When he saw Suchan carrying Hejin back, his body covered in blood. After a moment of silence, Professor G spoke up and asked what on earth had happened. Suchan replied that when the two of them entered an abandoned factory to find jungle juice, an insect human appeared. Professor G clenched his fist, causing the pillar next to him to explode, and growled that he wasn't asking about the homework to find that insect-killing spray, but why it had come to this. Just then, a red-haired woman walked over and asked what the people before were doing that made Professor G so angry. Hearing this voice, Professor G glanced over and softly called for Professor Yu. The woman continued saying that if Professor G kept this up, she couldn't take the patient away. Professor G asked why she was here, and Professor Yu calmly replied that if there was a patient, of course, she had to come, and told Suchan to put Hejin down. Taking off her gloves, Professor Yu created a stream of light over Hejin's wound, which made Suchan can't help but ask insistently. Something suddenly appeared on Professor Yu's hand, emitting a kind of magical light. To Suchan's confusion, the person next to him reassured him that this was just a form of therapy because Professor Yu possessed a special power. Half of her power is from firefly beetles, and the other half is from a parasitic fungus on insects called cordyceps. People have studied cordyceps and called it a panacea, thanks to its vitality and miraculous healing abilities. It can be said that Professor Yu's ability is the most mysterious and useful at this school. Under her treatment, Hejin's wound soon completely disappeared as if it had never happened. Suchan excitedly asked if that meant Hejin would be saved, right, but the answer he received was that it was too late because her heart had stopped beating for too long. Professor Yu explained that she only has healing abilities, and although it's hard to accept, a dead person cannot be brought back to life. Suchan froze on the spot, including Professor G, who was no exception. Professor Yu, with an unchanged expression, told the medical team to take the body inside, but Suchan resolutely refused to let go. He hugged Hejin, gritting his teeth, unable to accept it. In the past, every time they finished killing insects, Hejin and her brother were exhausted. She hated insects, and also hated this house with insects, sometimes thinking how great it would be if she were born into a rich family. Hearing this, Hejin's brother said that insects are considered filthy and disgusting, but sometimes there are beautiful moments, and they are the same. Everyone has times that are difficult and tiring, but full of happiness, and he had it because of Hejin. Saying these cheesy words made Hejin embarrassed and annoyed. Hejin's brother stood up and told her she had to seize every small moment of happiness and continue to live, while he would take care of catching the insects. So no matter how difficult it is, as long as you struggle, there will definitely be a way to live. Suddenly, Hejin's hand grabbed Suchan's, making him pause and call out her name loudly. This immediately attracted everyone's attention. All insects must undergo metamorphosis, shedding their old shells or external damage to transform into a true adult insect. No matter how ugly and scary an insect is, in its small life there is one time it sheds its skin to move to the next stage of its life. They say that is the most beautiful moment in an insect's life, and now a little cockroach is about to experience that beautiful moment. Hejin looked at Suchan as if she saw her brother, which made her get lost in thought, and only then did she realize it was Suchan and froze. Suchan didn't reply, only hugged her tighter, shedding tears of happiness, feeling so lucky. Not long after, Suchan was in the hospital and met Hisung and Doha again, wondering where they had been all this time. If Hisung remembered correctly, they were in another section of that warehouse when a violent tremor suddenly occurred. All the shelves there collapsed, trapping the two of them in the mess for several hours. Understanding this, Suchan felt they were lucky to be alive and didn't tell them what happened there. Suchan remembered and quickly asked if they had found any jungle juice, but unexpectedly all the sprays there were fake. Despite coming back empty-handed, Suchan still felt lucky that the homework deadline hadn't passed yet. Next, Suchan asked them how they found that abandoned factory when it was deep in the mountains. Hisung recalled that when they were asking around, a passerby told them. This person's style was a bit special, with white hair with a faint purple tint, and it seemed they also wore earrings. At the same time, this person had returned to some laboratory. Seeing him, another person jokingly said it was amazing he didn't drown in that drop of water. Then the young man recounted that the cleaning beetle they created had died, but he didn't expect there to be so many ambitious people in Nest. As he finished speaking, he burst the water bubble on his head, and as if it were familiar, the other person handed him a towel. Looking at this person's expression, it seemed he had found someone else he wanted to bring here. and this young man is the breeder with unknown information. He told the other person to contact the two spies they had planted in Nesty, only to find out the water beetle had been dealt with and the other one was hiding among the first-year students. The breeder, unfazed, wanted to do something very interesting. After that, Suchan's group continuously searched for jungle juice, but after a month, they hadn't even found a shell and the homework deadline had passed. Sitting in class, Suchan was trembling like a leaf after being empty-handed for a whole month. Professor G announced the results. No group found jungle juice, which only made the students more dissatisfied, questioning Professor G on how he wanted them to find it. Realizing everyone had the same bad results, Suchan even thought to himself that he was lucky. Unexpectedly, Professor G said it was natural that they couldn't find it, which stunned the whole class. If he knew where it was, he would have sent people to get it long ago. He stated that this assignment was just a process to train observation and gauge the students' diligence in searching. He knew this assignment was difficult, but Nest currently desperately needs jungle juice as the number of vials has dropped to only 23 this year. The reason is that besides Nest, there is another insect-human force targeting jungle juice for evil purposes. They are carrying out a plan to turn innocent, ordinary people into insect humans. Currently at Nest, there are quite a few of their victims who were hybridized from dangerous aliens. Recently, they have started to target Nest openly, so he will change the learning method from previous years. To put it bluntly, from now on, the students will no longer study this subject, but will immediately leave the classroom. This war represents a world where the big fish eats the small fish, and it can be life-threatening. That is, there might be seriously injured people like Group A in this assignment, or similarly, students might be killed. He knew someone who had stood on the brink of life and death and returned, so everyone must be mentally prepared to fight for their lives in this battle. After he finished speaking, every student showed confusion, worry and even fear. Meanwhile, Suchan stood up and asked if fighting these dangerous enemies would count towards their performance score. The entire class's attention turned to Suchan as he did something no one expected. Professor G confirmed, saying the total score, high or low, depends on the level of danger, so if anyone does well, they can be at the top of the entire department. When he missed Professor Ma's class and joined this one, Suchan thought he no longer had a chance to be at the top of the department. The higher the risk, the higher the achievement, which made him very satisfied. When he heard the news that the kid and the water beetle guy were dead, Hisung was very scared, but he had to overcome the limits of this dog-eat-dog world and beat them to a pulp. Beside him, Doha was even more enthusiastic, eager for a real fight. Following this lead, the morale of the other students rose in unison, dispelling the fear in their hearts. Although every year Hejin heard words of determination from the first-year students, those were just empty words when their lives weren't threatened. Many students have dropped this course because of the risk of injury, so she was quite satisfied with this batch. Even when facing the risk of death, not a single one backed down. Then Professor G ended the class, announcing that a special lesson would begin next week. And today happened to be the opening ceremony, a time for students to have fun and get to know each other. Suchan was stunned, unable to believe that Nest's opening ceremony allowed students to drink alcohol freely. Now remembering what happened before, Suchan felt shy, sitting next to Hejin not knowing what to do. Hejin was about to speak, but the chaotic scene of Hisung and Doha stopped her, and she could only swallow her words. Doha, drunk, choked Hisung for fun, constantly demanding more alcohol. Everyone around knew not to mess with Doha, because when he was drunk, he was even crazier than usual. Opening a can of drink for Hisung, Suchan asked if he liked Doha, because the two seemed very close. Hisung cursed Suchan, saying he was crazy, and retorted that he and Hejin were the same. Doha was so drunk she couldn't even open her can of drink. Suddenly, a male student walked over, did it for her, and then suggested they go out for a drink. And this was Jun Young, a first-year student in the Beneficial Insects department. Suchan wondered who he was, while Hejin vaguely felt she had seen this person before. At first, Doha seemed annoyed, but then she clung to Jun Young, blaming him for being late, and happily waited to go out. He vehemently denied it, but Suchan saw the bitter look on Hisung's face at the sight of Doha being friendly with another guy. Suddenly, Jun Young glanced over, which made Suchan freeze as he realized something. Lee Jun Young went to a secluded place, thinking that this matter hadn't been exposed yet.